Okay, good morning students. So today we explain about the synaptic transmission. So what is synaptic transmission? Here the synaptic transmission means the information transfers from one neuron to another neuron through the synapse. So synapse is a small space between the two neurons. Okay, for example, if we see this diagram, so this is one of the neuron, this is another neuron. So two neurons cannot join each other. So there is a small space between these two neurons. So this small space is called as the synapse. So the synapse is formed by two neurons. So this one is the presynaptic neuron. This is the presynaptic neuron, and this one is the postsynaptic neuron. Okay. So the synapse plays a crucial role to transfer the information from one neuron to another neuron. Okay, right. So these synapses are classified into two types. One is electrical synapse and some are chemical synapse. So these electrical synapses are mainly present in the brain region. Okay, right. So if you talk a few words about electrical synapse, here the electrical synapse is electrically conductive links between the two neurons. So pre and post synaptic neurons. Okay, so the space between the two neurons are very little. So very little when we compare to the chemical synapse. Okay, yes, so very little. So the two neurons in electrical synapse, the two neurons are very closely associated. The gap is very little when we compare to the chemical synapse. So the impulse transmission across the two neurons always faster than the chemical synapse. Okay, right. Now we talk about the chemical synapse. So chemical synapse are generally located in our total body. Okay, right. So commonly we seeing the chemical synapse only. Okay, we found the chemical synapse only in our body. Okay, so this is the diagram about the chemical synapse. So this is the diagram of the chemical synapse. Yes, here the chemical synapse also formed by the two neurons. Okay, so this is the presynaptic neuron, and this one is the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, right. So presynaptic neuron means one axon end. So this is one of the axon end, and this is the dendrite of the another neuron. Okay, so postsynaptic means it is the dendrite of the another neuron. This one is the axon end of the first neuron. Okay, right. So this is the presynaptic neuron and this is the postsynaptic neuron. So there is some gap. So this gap is generally nothing but called as the synapse. So this gap is called as the synapse. Okay, right. So this gap generally 13 nanometers. It is generally the space is about the 13 nanometers. Okay, yes, right. So first we observe about the presynaptic neurons. Okay, so this is the presynaptic neuron. Yes, in the presynaptic neuron, generally there is many of vesicles. So these are many of vesicles. So these vesicles are filled with neurotransmitter. That is, these vesicles are filled with some chemicals. So these chemicals are called as the neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters. Okay, so neurotransmitters. So some chemical is filled with these vesicles. So that chemicals are called as the neurotransmitters. Okay, right. So here the acetylcholine is the common neurotransmitter. Okay, so neurotransmitter means it transfers the information from one neuron to another neuron. So that's why the chemical is called as the neurotransmitter. The common neurotransmitter or chemical is acetylcholine. Okay, right. So when the nerve impulse or the axon potential arrives the end of the axon, when the action potential arrives end of the axon, then here the calcium gated channels are open. Calcium gated channels are open. Okay, so when the calcium gated channels are open, then the calcium enters into the nopes, okay, the axon terminals. So calcium enter into the axon terminals, and it stimulates the vesicles, it stimulates the movement of the vesicles towards the membrane, it stimulates the movement of the vesicles towards the membrane. So where the vesicle fused with the plasma membrane of the axon, okay. Next, so what happens then the chemical which is present in the vesicle, it will be secreted into the synapse region by exocytosis process. Okay, so by the exocytosis process, the chemical acetylcholine neurotransmitter secretes into the synapse, in the synapse region. Okay, right. So then what happens here, the acetylcholine, then it was received by the some neurotransmitter receptors. So these are the neurotransmitter receptors which are present on the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, now the neurotransmitter acetylcholine received by the receptors which are present on the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, students. So here, so when the neurotransmitter is secreted in the region of synapse, then the neurotransmitter binds with the specific receptors which are present on the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, so after the function of acetylcholine, then it digested in this region, then it disappears. After the function, the acetylcholine disappears or digested in this synapse region. Okay, how it digested? So here the after the function, so acetylcholine digested into acetic acid plus choline by the enzyme called as choline esterase. So choline esterase enzyme. So this choline esterase breaks the acetylcholine, break down the acetylcholine into acetic acid and choline. Then the acetic acid and choline go back into the vesicles, and then go back into the vesicles. Okay, so like that, after the functioning, the acetylcholine go back into the vesicles by the breakdown, by here the using of the choline esterase enzyme. Okay, right. So what is the function of acetylcholine neurotransmitter? So when the neurotransmitter binds with the specific receptor, then the neurotransmitter stimulates the ions to generate new action potential on the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, new action potential. That means new message. Okay, right. So this new action potential may be excitatory or inhibitory.
When an action potential reaches the terminal button, synaptic vesicles release neurotransmitters into the synaptic cleft. The neurotransmitters diffuse through the synaptic cleft to the membrane of the receiving neuron, that is, to the postsynaptic membrane. Neurotransmitters attach to the ion channel receptors in the postsynaptic membrane. Their attachment opens up the ion channels in the membrane, allowing ions to flow through. The more neurotransmitters are released, the more ions flow through the ion channels. In excitatory chemical synapses, sodium ions flow through the postsynaptic membrane into the cell, while potassium ions flow out of the cell. The influx and efflux of ions increase the membrane potential compared to the rest.
The excitatory action potential causes depolarization, and the inhibitory action potential causes hyperpolarization. Okay, hyperpolarization. Okay, right. So what is excitatory inhibitory? Excitatory means activates the nervous system. Inhibitory means it slows the nervous system. Okay, right. Here, if you take the neurotransmitters, if you observe the neurotransmitters, generally the common neurotransmitter is acetylcholine. But beside of this, many of neurotransmitters are present. Okay, so what are the neurotransmitters? Here, so one is the acetylcholine. One is the neurotransmitter is acetylcholine. Another one is dopamine. Okay, and third one is serotonin. Serotonin. So these three are the excitatory neurotransmitters. Okay, excitatory or inhibitory. So both neurotransmitters. So they are both acts like excitatory or inhibitory. So beside this, there is another sum, that is GABA. This is one of the neurotransmitter. Okay, right. Another one is norepinephrine. Okay, norepinephrine. So norepinephrine is another one. So another one is glutamic acid. So glutamate is one of the neurotransmitter. And another one is endorphin. So endorphin. So these are the neurotransmitters. Okay, yes. So here the GABA is the inhibitory neurotransmitter. Okay, right. Here acetylcholine generally it stimulates the smooth muscles. Okay, right. If you based on the habitat, based on the behavior, it also helps in the function of the acetylcholine according to behavior. It helps in learning, okay, memory, thinking. So like this process, intellectual functions. So regulates regulated by acetylcholine. And if you take the dopamine, so the dopamine is feeling pleasure. It causes to feeling pleasure. Okay, and motivations. Okay, like the repeated actions are also regulated by the dopamine. Okay, yes. So here the serotonin. So serotonin is the emotional and moods neurotransmitter. So it regulates the emotions, moods. Okay, so here if the deficiency of acetylcholine generally causes Alzheimer's disease. If the lack of or the deficiency of dopamine generally causes here the Parkinson's disease. Okay, and the deficiency of serotonin causes the depression. Okay, so when we get happiness, then in our body the serotonin is released. Okay, the neurotransmitter serotonin is released, and GABA, it slows the nervous system. Okay, right. So here the epinephrine. So epinephrine generally here the function, it helps in the some body functions. Okay, it generally regulates the blood flowing in the blood vessels. It regulates the heart functions, like that. So if you take the glutamate. So glutamate neurotransmitter helps in the learning, memory, creativeness. So in this time, generally glutamate is secreted in our body. Okay, and the endorphin. So endorphin is pain-free neurotransmitter. So when we doing the exercises, then it releases. Then it will releases. It keeps the health. It keeps our healthiness. Okay, right. And so if the deficiency of endorphin, then it causes the painful bodies. It causes some pains in the body. Okay, so this is the information about the synaptic transmission.